Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Fence, brought to you in association with Boyle Sports and of course on all the At The Races digital platforms. And this is your go-to weekly jumps programme with myself, Barry Erity, and Tony Keenan, talking all things National Hunt Racing. But of course we haven't had a huge amount of National Hunt Racing over the last week or so, since the festive period really and the new year, because of the weather. Rain in the UK and fog mainly in Ireland stopping play. We will get to that in due course, but let's have a very quick check-in with the boys. Barry, we had a ram-packed show last week, and then this week we've got a little bit more space to discuss a few different topics, including some anti-post selections, courtesy of yourself and Tony. But in the meantime, how are you over there?
Good, quiet weekend on the racing front, so probably the highlight was Davy Russell on the Irish Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah, go on, give him a mark out of 10 in your opinion. How was he?
For what I might do it was a 10. So you could see Davy was a bit nervous, but no, he got through it, and I'm sure he'll improve as he goes. But well, I wouldn't be one in any position to slag anyone for dancing.
I'm sure Davy Russell being nervous isn't really that common occurrence. Well, in his racing days anyway, was it?
That's why it was so noticeable. A very, very rare thing. I can't imagine. I've no recollection of Davy being as even he was hoarse, he was tense, he was everything. So no, I'd say it was a struggle for him. Yeah, it's a difficult thing.
Well, I hear he's putting a lot of hard yards in with the training as well. So fingers crossed for him, and now I'm sure he'll settle into the rhythm of it into next week. Tony, are you a Dancing with the Stars fan? Is it something you watch on a Sunday night over there?
No offence to Dave, but definitely not. The NFL would be the NFL would very much be king in our house now in the winter time. No, I know the racing was fairly moderate over the weekend and this and that, but there were some nice underdogs winning there on Saturday and Sunday there. Couple of maybe horse to give a mention to the Capo Glory won for a small yard down in Cork there. Nice photos after it. The young girl there, the wee sign cheering it on. That was kind of nice. And there's a few lads on social media kind of seem to have got into a nice winner there at Newcastle. I think it was Blazing Soldier. They were knocking good crack out of that. And yourself, Vanessa, you had a man in tears there at Stuart Dunn, I think his name is. I know a few of the lads involved in that. Carrigan Castle. They got a great kick out of that. So look, it's nice to see ordinary people having nice winners there on Saturdays. I know it wasn't Grade 1 action or anything like that, but I'd say the joy those people took from those three winners, I'd say was fairly up there in their achievements in racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And rightly said as well, because it is funny, like that Carrigan Castle, I just happened to interview them beforehand because they were taking a few photos of their horse in the paddock, and so you're live and you're just cruising around, and I went and interviewed the syndicate members and they just were like, we just want him to come home safe, and then he went and won. And honestly, that lad in tears, Stuart, it's just great. And I know it sounds sort of like I think people think I'm just saying it, but honestly, on those smaller days, you get such a buzz out of meeting those sort of people and, seeing what fun they get out of horse racing. So yeah, might not have been the sort of like headline acts and superstars of our game, but it gives the sort of, like you say, the underdogs a bit of a chance. But you mentioned Grade 1 action there, Tony, and of course we didn't see any Grade 1 action because of the fog in Ireland. Naas's big day with the Lawlor's Novices hurdle, the Grade 1 was due to take place on Sunday. Couple of inspections in the morning, they finally gave racing the go-ahead, and then they ran one race in pretty deep fog, couldn't really see very much at all, and then abandoned the meeting thereafter. They have rescheduled it to Friday, and stay tuned, viewers, because we will be looking ahead to that race a little bit later in our programme. But just in terms of whether they should or shouldn't have raced, what's your view on it, Tony?
Completely right decision, I'd say. You may have put toilet paper in the form book is what they were going to put on there yesterday. Would mean absolutely nothing what you could see. So I made the journey to Naas yesterday. I have an absolutely brilliant record of going to these fog meetings, I have to say. I'd say for a fella that doesn't go racing all that much, my record of making these is incredible. I was at the Solwith Day in Fairy House. It was way worse actually than yesterday, I would say. I don't know how the race that day was amazing. The T&Cs day, the jacket on one, I was at that. I was at was a day in Leopardstown won the Christmas, I think the 28th. I think they abandoned after three races, and they ran what was the Lexus at the time on the 29th. I think What a Friend won it. So yeah, but my greatest bock of all time, I don't know if I've ever told you this, I got the Eber bocked one year in York, the Eber meeting. Now, how do you stop like a meeting in the middle of August? This is terrible stuff. So I was after getting a few bob for correcting leaving cert exams, and I said, look, I'm going to go and do something decent with this. And I said, sure, look, I'll head to the Eber meeting. I'd never been. So over I went anyway. This was grand. So checked into the hotel maybe on the Monday evening, and the lady at reception says, oh, it's not looking great for tomorrow. I said, sorry, what? So the whole thing was cancelled. Trekking around York for a day or two. I just finished up getting a flight home. There was no sign of any racing. It was the year. I think did they run the international maybe at Newmarket afterwards. Duke of Marmalade won it anyway, and the Eber itself might have been run at Newbury on the Saturday. So yeah, I've never been back to York since. Actually, I must at some point, but I kind of got a little bit of a sickener after that.
Only you, Tony, going around meetings and just getting them called off courtesy of bad weather conditions. God, that's a terrible record. Watch out, any meeting that Tony Keenan tips up to. Barry, did you think the fog was bad enough to call the meeting off? Have you raced in worse than that, is actually the question I have for you.
Well, for me, the problem with it was that it seemed to be lifting a little bit and then it would come back down again. So at one stage you could see 100 yards and then you couldn't. So it was very difficult to call, but it was never clearing. They were right to try, but you know, it was pointless at the time, and the fact it never lifted, and speaking to people on course when they were leaving the track at 2:30, 3 o'clock, it was even potentially worse then. So no, I'd say it wasn't an option, but yeah, so Tony's had bad luck in fog. I'd probably gone one worse than you, Tony. I rode What a Friend to the start in that Lexus Chase, and I had to go to Newbury the following day and watch Sam Thomas win on him, so I think I've had worse though.
Definitely.
That is a sickener, Barry. God.
Well, it was the time. Yeah, I'm over it on Vanessa. Thanks.
Oh, well done. You've managed to move on.
Yeah.
Just. Okay, bad fog stories have kicked off for this episode of Off the Fence. We have a brief look back at what happened where, because of course we did have a bit of racing, and as the meeting at Naas was called off on Sunday, Plumpton on Sunday had no such issues. Sussex National Day, great crowd, Premier Race Day here in the UK, and also saw one of the performances in terms of a jockey sit and then win of the season, Barry, because Joe Anderson on transmission managed to stay on when this horse made a blunder that I think 99% of the time any jockey would have fallen off, but just balance went the right way. He manages to stay on this horse and then somehow manages to win as well. And I know it's probably part luck in terms of being able to stay on the horse, put his head in the right place and all of that. But to go stirrupless for so long looked A, painful, but B, pretty impressive that he then managed to get his stirrups back and win.
Yeah, no, Joe did brilliant. And you do need a little bit of luck, but more than that, you know, you need to be fit, you need to be strong. You talk about core strength, but just if you were to watch the footage, you know, the horse gets a little bit keen just on the approach to that hurdle, and that hurdle, the ground falls away at the back of it. He just seemed to paddle at it, got in his head, fired Joe up on his head, so he's on his head, on his neck, and then he's to scramble back in. And as the camera changes, before the camera gets back an angle again, Joe is on board. Like, he wasn't out of the saddle, I'd say a matter of 1 or 2 seconds before he was back in. So that took a lot of fitness to get himself back into position, swing his leg back over at pace and get back in. But the stirrup leather, one of the stirrup leathers had come across the wrong side, so he'd both stirrups on one side, if you like. And the more he tried to get the stirrup back onto the right side, the horse was getting keener, so he had to just ride away until the horse was relaxed. Then he could switch it across, get his feet back in the stirrups and ride a race. It was a brilliant piece of riding. And then to go and win it. Like, what's the chances? Yeah. We saw Hugh Morgan in Navan a couple of seasons ago lose his irons and rode the whole race bareback, if you like, and won. You don't usually win, and you would think you'd forfeit most of your chance by going, you know, length of the race, bopping around, sitting on your tail end. It's not going to improve your horse's chances where your weight is off the back normally. But brilliant performance by Joe. It just showed his fitness. Certain amount of luck, but I would say more so his fitness and strength to get him into the saddle, and, you know, top marks, so he's a good lad.
Yeah, amazing effort, and he was so cool afterwards. The Sky Sports racing team were making such a fuss, and rightly so, and the commentator as well on the day. And then you got to the interview with him, and he was like, "Yeah, just very relaxed about it." But kudos to him, definitely. And now look, as I say, not a huge amount to look back on, but we will just pick up a couple of performances that we didn't talk about over the Christmas period, because we had so much in last week's show. It was absolutely ram-packed, so we've got a bit of room to breathe, so to speak, Barry. And Bob Olinger would be worth a mention. We didn't talk about him winning the Relkeel hurdle at Cheltenham on New Year's Day. He's really back this season, isn't he? There's no getting away from that the real Bob Olinger seems to be showing up now.
Yeah, a very good performance in Navan on his comeback. And then this was, as James Bowen said in his interview afterwards, it was ridiculous what he did in the straight. James was second in Marie's Rock, ran a really good race. But Bob Olinger, we saw a glimmer of the Bob Olinger that we saw 3 years ago when he won the Ballymore. It was a brilliant performance. I know they're ruling out the Stairs hurdle, and even Robert Power mentioned he'll have an entry in the Champion hurdle, but maybe Aintree is more likely. He's had 2 goals at 3 miles. One of them was behind Home by the Lee in Leopardstown when he was completely wrong, and the previous one was in a chase behind Capodanno in Punchestown when he turned out to have chips in his hock or something, so he was pulled up there. So they're the only 2 times he's tried 3 mile, with the exception of his point to point. So I think they're a bit rash. Maybe they're keeping away from the Stairs because they have Tia Hoopu, but that's a very confident view to have, to think that you have that one in the bag, because for myself I'd rather go to war with Bob Olinger in the Stairs than Tia Hoopu, and I do think Tia Hoopu has a big chance and a favourite's chance, but I think this fella could be just different class. But they'll make their own decision and see, maybe he'll be in a Champion hurdle, or maybe he just wait for entry. But it was a really good performance, and great to see him back to the level of form that he had shown in the past. So it was really good to see.
Oh, that's very interesting that you'd hold him in such high regard in that staying hurdling category if he was to go down that route, which, as Barry said, Tony, doesn't seem to be the option at the moment. What was your view on Bob Olinger? Would you rate him quite so highly?
No. Look, they've done well. They've got him back to win 2 races this season, but I think his head carriage is getting worse by every start, I'd say, at the minute. Like, he really now his head in the air going up the hill at Cheltenham. I don't know what he beat. The Navan form is fairly ordinary now at Sana here, and Home by the Lee, ran fairly poorly at Christmas. Look, if he was to stay off now until Aintree, maybe he'd be going there with a bit of freshness in hand, but I don't think he's anywhere close to the horse that kind of won the Ballymore. I've kind of been saying this all along. It's probably a bit of a mad take, but I think they should try the flat with him at some stage. I think kind of an easier type of race. I think if he went up to 3 miles, he'd be well beaten now. I think kind of in a slog like that, getting him into the easiest race possible is the kind of ideal setup for him. Trainer's well capable on the flat. Like he did well with Jason the Millet, and I think he got a listed race out of him, and you could argue Bob Olinger's probably at that level as him over hurdles. So, but no, he wouldn't be a horse now I'd have my radar for back in any kind of race where it was going to have to get down and dirty with a horse, because I think attitude is still a bit suspect despite having won two races this season. But again, look, good bit of training to get him back, because he did look on last season altogether.
A difference of opinion from the boys, Barry and Tony, but that's why we love the game. It's all about our opinions. Let us know, viewers out there, listeners out there. I'm intrigued. Whose side are you on when it comes to the Bob Olinger argument? Are you as keen as Barry or as negative as Tony? Do let us know in the comments box below. Please do get involved. We love to hear from you. And coming up in the show, I'll be letting you know about a free bet as well that will involve you commenting below on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. But just to wrap up the review section, Tony, obviously we gave Limerick not very much time at all other than Gaelic Warrior over Christmas, because of course we were so focused on what was happening at likes of Kempton and Leopardstown. What performances did we miss from Limerick that we may well need to just go back and watch, or just keep an eye out for going forward?
Well, definitely, I think Gaelic Warrior was the standard performance in terms of high class race and stuff like that. But I've a little bit looked through some of the replays there. with Naas spin off and that, and I've 5 horses that I thought shaped better than the formula. They're all kind of low to mid grade handicappers, maiden hurdles and stuff like that, but I might just give a quick run through these 5. There might be ones you be maybe typically track of horses type of thing that we'll be talking about at the end of the show, but hopefully one or two of them might be able to pop up at a price. The first one ran on the 20s, was on the 26th, yeah, Hurricane Bailey in a mare's maiden hurdle, Trimby Barry Fitzgerald. I really rate this lad as a trainer. Excellent with the small number of horses that he has. There was a few quid knocking around for this one, which is usually a good sign with his first time out. Came from kind of a nice bit off the pace. I thought she finished up making her move a bit sooner than ideal, got to the lead well, jumping 2 out, was a little bit green. It was a very, very promising debut in a race that kind of the Mullins horseman played late. Judices Allen probably suited that one. Then on to the 27th, there was a few eye catchers there in a 2 mile handicap hurdle. One Big John Gus thought it through and did well, come from off the pace, but he's kind of 1 from 34 in his career. And Tip for Mac was another one that ran alright, but the one I really thought to take from was a horse called Lorca, trained by Edward O'Grady. Shipped well on his kind of penultimate start there at Torres behind Westward Cove, and then showed very little on his qualifying run after that, but this was a really good effort, kind of first handicap, kind of more around the inside than most. I think there was a massive inside-outside bias at Limerick. Track seemed to be riding fairly fair over the 4 days, but ground was a bit chopped up at this point in the card, and maybe going down around the inside wasn't ideal. Came from a nice bit back, didn't get a hard time, kind of very unexposed, has shown already that he can win it. Was Andrew Balding on the flat in Britain, so you know, I think there's definitely a handicap to be won with that. Then on to the 28th. Now kind of ground kind of got quite testing by the 28th, and they were on to kind of fresh ground, but the last couple of races again it got quite chopped up down the inside, and a couple of ones I thought shipped well in the last few races. There's a horse called Listen to the Lady. It seems to be only after moving from Ireland, and again I'm not massively familiar with the jockey here. It's a Miss J. Walton. She seems to own the horse as well and has always ridden it when it was in the UK, but it's won plenty of kind of low grade stay and handicap hurdles in England. And again, I thought it just shaped well mid-ground, lovely, smooth now from out the back and down the inside. And there'd been a faller at the second last, the first time round, so she had to switch round out that, which kind of inconvenienced her. Now she only finished 5th in the end, but just looked like one that could kind of improve on that if it could get a bit more luck maybe and not get a track bias going against it the next day. Now the best one I think of all is a horse that ran in the bumper on the 28th. Now this bumper was a 2 mile 2 bumper, developed into an awful slog, but a horse called Barton Snow, it caught the eye on his previous start at Galway as well, but again it was kind of trapped around the inner, and it just made a huge move, kind of leaving the back straight to hit kind of, I think hit even money and running. This horse was sent off 66s or 80s or massive price. Looked the winner kind of 4 long and a half down, and then kind of just died a death in the last 4 long and a half, finished 6th in the end, but that one there, I'd be very disappointed if that can't pick up a race. And the last one, this is probably the most obvious of all. There's a massive kind of gamble on this horse, and I'd say anyone who backed it was probably feeling pretty sick with themselves. A horse called Now Is the Hour. It was in a kind of an auction maiden hurdle or something like that. Gavin Cromwell trains it. Now they went a very, very strong pace afterwards. Now Conor McNamara rode the winner, a horse called oh God, I can't think of it. He kind of an unusual. Oh, sorry, the Graveyard Bookie, and he was kind of out the back early, and kind of he was interviewed after, and it was a very smug interview out of him. Now he might have been as well keeping quiet with this, but he sort of said, "Oh, I always thought I was going to get there. That the claimant jockey in front had gone a bit too hard on Gavin Cromwell's horse." Now I'd say Gavin Cromwell's horse was a minute the best horse in it, and just kind of probably did kick on just that little bit early, and he tipped up at the second last one, looking all over the winner. Look, he'd definitely be a horse to keep on side, although he probably would want a little bit of time to. He wouldn't want to be out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, kind of leave him maybe till the start of February or afterwards, because he did have a hard race and a fall there at the end of that. So, but yeah, I think he could definitely pick up an ordinary maiden hurdle. So there were just a few from maybe the more moderate races in Limerick that I thought maybe shipped a bit better than the form.
Like it. I mean, 99, I think it's safe to say that 99.9% of us out here would have missed those. So thank you very much, Tony. Great to have them for the notebook. Barry, over to you for picking up any pieces that we may have missed over the festive period. Did you want to throw anyone else into the mix just in terms of kind of eye catchers?
Yeah, well, just a couple. There was a juvenile in Limerick Bunting, put in a good performance, looked very green in front, jumped really well, but looked like one that was going to improve plenty, and he was in the right colours too with Tony Bloom, so I'd say he could be a smart one. And the other was the juvenile race in Leopardstown. We did get to review it, but the one that I picked out of that was Cargies. Ran very keen through the race, finished second to Carla Conti with Nürburgring in third, only beaten 3/4 of a length. But if you watch it down the back straight, never stop pulling the arms off Danny Mullen. So I'd imagine when this one does learn to settle, is very capable of a better performance. So 2 juveniles that I liked from Christmas.
Okay, juvenile category it is then for Barry. Now, we are going to look ahead to a couple of Cheltenham Ante-Post markets whilst we have the opportunity. The boys have just they're about to make a case anyway for some pretty big priced horses in a couple of the races. But before we go any further, viewers out there on YouTube, to be in with the chance of winning a £20 free bet, courtesy of course, our partners in Ball Sports, comment below on your best anti-post selection at this point for the Cheltenham Festival, and we are going to read through the comments and pick a winner out of there, and you will get a free bet. So comment below your best anti-post selection for the Cheltenham Festival at this very early stage. And of course that leads me on, Tony, to you, because when you're talking about these selections, what are we, 7 weeks out, whatever it is now, we're still so far away, we have no idea what's going to line up. And when I rattle through the betting for the races we'll be discussing, just the same rules apply, that so many of these horses won't be in these races that they're priced up for. So there's plenty of potholes to avoid when tackling the anti-post markets at this stage. What's your advice to people out there if they're having an anti-post bet?
Don't bother. Look, I know.
Cheer in January, aren't you, Tony?
No, I know. Look, anti-post betting's great crack. Like, you have a bet now, you have far more connection with that bet, and you're probably not far more fun out of it than a bet you'll have half an hour before race, I don't know, tomorrow, wherever they're racing tomorrow. But sometimes, look, I just wonder, do we miss, and I'm not telling anyone how to bet, everyone can bet their own kind of way, and whatever you do is totally up to yourself, but I just sometimes wonder, do we miss kind of what's in front of our face with betting and with anti-post betting and with Cheltenham and the kind of monster it's become. I've read this lad online, his name's David Malinsky, he's an American punter. It was Garage Norris who put me into this lad. He's sadly passed away since. He used to write this column for about 3 or 4 years every day on kind of betting. He was an absolute authority on it, absolutely brilliant writer. It has a massive American slant in it, but he had this idea that, you know, maybe just concentrate on winning your next bet. Now maybe that's a bit easier in America because it's always pick'ems and kind of 10 to 11 shots and stuff like that, but maybe just try and back a winner tomorrow or at the weekend rather than trying to back one that's 2 months away. Might just be a better use of your time and your tank. Like, say that Naas race now coming up on Friday, like, you might be going into that train to say, well, maybe I'll back Firefox for a race at Cheltenham, maybe I'll back Ile Atlantique for a race at Cheltenham, maybe I'll chance one of the rags backing for the Albert Bartlett, something like that. Like, you need a lot to go right for that to be a good bet, you know, come Friday at 3 o'clock, because you probably need your horse to run or to run well. You need the horse to stay healthy. You need them to run in the race that you want them to run in. You need the yard probably not to have something better, because if Paul Down or Jack Kennedy gets in something else, it's probably not a great sign. I'm just wondering, like, if you've got a strong opinion on any of those horses, like you think one of the front two is markedly better than the other, or you think that one of the rags is massively overpriced, like, why not just bet them in the race on Friday? Like, that might be a far better use of your betting tank. Like, so that's just a thought in anti-post betting in general. I do have a small selection coming up, but that would be my big thought. Oh, and one other thing, just about each way betting anti-post horses at the minute, like, to me that is just largely a no-no at the moment, like, with 1 or 2 exceptions that I might mention. I just think you're tying up 2 stakes when you're not getting a non-run of money back kind of concession. I'd be very kind of reluctant to do that with what you've said, with so many different permutations about the different races that they could go for. And if you are like having an each way bet, maybe just have all of it on the win and just roll at the variance and hope it kind of goes your way. Now, there would be exceptions, like say you were trying to bet something like Stateman each way in the Champion Hurdle, like
filthy, but yes,
act the God to knock him out of it, really. Or something like the Arkle, where maybe it's going to cut up. You know, maybe Marine National is going to scare a few of them off, and you're not going to have an 8-runner field. So things like that each way may be fair enough, but as a rule, when they're actually full anti-post rules in play, where you're going to do your dough if it doesn't run, I would be, nearly no matter what the price, I wouldn't be that keen on betting each way.
Okay. Some tips going forward then for those people who may or may now not have an anti-post bet ahead of the Cheltenham Festival, off the back of what Tony's just said. But Barry, you have sort of dug out a few value horses, I think, it's fair to say, for our viewers and listeners out there, for the Cheltenham Festival, one in the Mares Hurdle and one in the Turners Novices Chase. Who did you land on and why with your first selection?
Yeah, well, Love Envoi, who was second in the Mares Hurdle to Honeysuckle last year, she's 7 from 9 in England over hurdles. She's ran twice in Ireland and has been beaten. But her only 2 defeats in England, one was to Honeysuckle, a length and a half in the Mares Hurdle last season, and she was beaten by Not So Sleepy on very heavy ground in Sandown on her return this season. I think we can very easy to forgive her defeat in Sandown. She is probably nearly the top rated mare in this field, so we're still waiting to see Lossiemouth, who is the favourite. We're waiting to see her out. She had an entry in the Rail Keel, she didn't take that up, so we're waiting to see her. But of the opposition, Astro Diamond, she's rated 10 or 11 pound above her. Gala Marceau likewise as well, I think about 9 pound. Like, she's a top class mare. And ran a brilliant race in this race last year. You know she's going to be trained for this one, and I take on board what Tony's saying, but I can't imagine there's any other option for Love Envoi, only the mare's race at Festival if she's alive. So I'd forgive her run in Sandown, and if she turned up in the shape she was in last year, I think Lossiemouth would need to be in good shape to beat her.
Interesting. And Ball Sports have very kindly boosted these anti-post selections from the boys. So she is a general 8-1 shot in the mare's hurdle market currently, but she's been boosted right out to 12-1. Now, of course, T's and C's apply. Please do read them in the show's description, and that will be for a limited time only. But at 12-1, with the case that Barry has just made for her, you can see that is a very generous offer, I think it's fair to say, from Ball Sports. So do avail of that if you so wish. But Barry, on to your next selection. Who else did you think represented a little bit of anti-post value in the markets currently for the festival?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of forgiveness needed, but Corbetts Cross, I don't think we saw the best of him.
We're back with Corbetts Cross. I love it, Barry. The clipboard.
I watched the replay of him again winning in Furious, and he jumped brilliantly. He jumped like a proper chaser. He just never seemed to have that spark in him in Leopardstown. He was dropped out over 3 mile, gave away ground, but the idea being to get him settled and find the rhythm. He didn't find the rhythm. He didn't jump amazingly, but he still finished second. So it was a reasonable run. I think he's better. He's capable of far better than that. But the main reason why I'm picking this fella is because I want to take on Gaelic Warrior. Gaelic Warrior is the best horse in the race. I don't doubt his ability, but I do doubt him going left-handed. I think he's going to find Gaelic Warrior is going to be turning right over a lot of these fences, giving away ground. That can also affect your rhythm, your jumping. So I'd have a big concern about Gaelic Warrior, and I'd be looking to take him on with something. And Corbetts Cross would be the one for me. Returning to 2.5 mile, ridden more competitively. The way he jumped in Fairy House, it wasn't just a flash in the pan. He jumped like a proper chaser. So, as I said, a little bit of forgiveness, but I'm looking for something to take on Gaelic Warrior with, and Corbetts Cross will be the one for me.
I love it, Barry. It's music to my ears. You know how I feel about this horse. So we're all jumping off this cliff together with Corbetts Cross, and Ball Sports are too, because they have boosted him out to 14-1 for the Turners Novices Chase at the Cheltenham Festival. He's 12-1. He should be 12-1, but he's been price boosted to 14s. So again, a pretty generous offer from them. And read the T's and C's. You know the drill by now. So we've got Love Envoi and Corbetts Cross. Tony, who would you like to add into the mix, and in what race?
Well, later what I'm after saying, maybe I should keep my mouth shut, but I have one horse here that look, I think it's a little bit overpriced, but I would actually maybe wait until something happens next week with this horse, which I will mention. I think the Ryanair's race where maybe the front end isn't wonderful, with Allaho and so on. I kind of mentioned him last week. It wasn't in love with his effort in the King George. I don't know that Clonmel proved an awful lot. So the horse I kind of like is Fil D'Or. Now, he would need to improve, but I think he has improved a little bit this season. He was a decent juvenile hurdler in quite a good year with Foban and so on. But the thing about him, I think all the way through that juvenile season, he looked like he wanted 2.5 miles. Then he started last season, he went over fences. Really good performance first time out over fences at Navan, jumped very well. And then he went to Leopardstown at Christmas and he just made an awful mistake. And I think it's just season fell asunder from there. I know he did win the Red Mills after that, but just things went wrong from them back over hurdles. He went into that race with Fabiolo at the DRF and, just wasn't up to it. But this season, I think he's kind of run second to probably the two best 2 mailers in Ireland, looking like he wants further. He's been second to Dano Blue, who backed up the form of Christmas, and he's been second to an Ergum. I think on both those occasions he looked like he wanted to go up to 2.5. Hasn't really got that opportunity yet, despite spending about 2.5 years looking like that's his trip. And I think he tried last year in the Coral Cup, but he wasn't kind of in form and at Fairyhouse. So I think he seems to be on song at the moment. I would really like to see him have an entry in the Horse and Jockey or the Old Kinloch Bray or whatever it was at Torres on Sunday week. I think that's probably the race for him. Now, my only concern is I just reading an article on IrishRacing.com yesterday where the same owners are talking about running Imagine in that, who's a novice. I was really surprised at that. I'm just wondering, is there something up with Fil D'Or? So I'd kind of like to see him have an entry before I'd consider backing him. He was obviously entered in the Ryanair and the Champion Chase last week, so I presume he's well, but just that little niggling thing about the owner mate going forward would seem the obvious target for him. But I think if you can get him up to 2.5 miles, we might see him improve again, because his 2 mile form this season has been pretty good.
Okay, case made then for Fil D'Or in the Ryanair, and I think lots of people agree that the top of that market looks somewhat patchy with the likes of Allaho. Is he the same horse that he was when he's won those Ryanairs? We don't just not that convinced of that. Fil D'Or has been price boosted to 40-1 from 33s with Ball Sports, so a 40-1 selection from Tony. Given his spiel about anti-post betting, you can do what you want with that selection. But Tony, let's move on to talk about, let's move on to the preview part of our show, because of course we've got good racing this weekend, and fingers crossed the weather doesn't prevent us from seeing such sport. The Lawlor's Novices hurdle at Naas is obviously rescheduled for Friday. Hopefully we'll see the match between Firefox and Ile Atlantique, as well as Mystical Power in there. Did you have a strong betting view on the race, or do you have an idea of how you think it'll pan out if these lads all line up on Friday?
No, I don't have a strong betting view. I'm expecting largely the same field to pitch up here again. It's an interesting one in that I think historically, since it's gone up to Grade 1, I think there's been 9 runnings. Gordon Elliott's won 4, Willie Mullins 4, and Henry Durham had won it with Bob Olinger. Gordon Elliott would tend to run probably his best horse in it, his best novice anyway, or damn close to it, with Envoi Allen, Death Duty, Battle Over Dying in those years would have been his best horse. Now, Willie Mullins has won it plenty of times, but I don't think he runs his best novice here. But he has such depth that he has been able to be more than competitive in it and win his share of them. So that's just something to bear in mind. I think it's probably fair to say Firefox would probably look Gordon Elliott's best horse. He's left that impression. Although Calder, Potter and Farron Glory have both been pretty good too. Ile Atlantique, we're just not sure what is Willie Mullins' best at this point. So something to bear in mind. Also a little bit surprised that Willie Mullins declared all 5 of the initial entries that he had. So I don't know, what does that say? Does he have a star among them, or is he just hoping to win it a bit like last year with Champ Cayley? So that's another kind of way to look at it. Of the front two, I'd probably lean towards Firefox, because I think Ballybourne, obviously the form worked out really well, although Ile Atlantique's form has worked out well also. But just the fact that Willie Mullins' star novice holders do tend to win first time out, Firefox is good enough to beat Ballybourne, is probably a good sign. But the one niggling thing I have in the back of my head is that I actually think that there's a possibility that both the front two in the market are going to be better over shorter. Ile Atlantique was not the strongest finisher in his bumpers last year's final 2 starts, and Firefox, while he started out over 2.5 miles, has got sharper and sharper as his kind of career has gone on. So it wouldn't massively surprise me if there were to be a boil over. Look, I don't have a strong betting view on it, but so I'm not going to make a strong case for one or the other. I would lean Firefox, but it wouldn't be surprising me if both of the two of them finished up in best back over 2 later in the spring.
Intriguing. Barry, would you agree with what Tony's saying there in regards to the top two's trip for starters, but that there is potential for a boil over?
Yeah, I just wouldn't be fully convinced like Tony at the trip whether it is right for them. 2 very smart horses, but I think there's a bit more in the field as well. On Tober, put the shoe on the other foot. The Royal Bond was ran at a controlled pace. He had to do his own work from 3 out. I don't think that suited him. He ran a good race. There was a good bit of stable confidence behind him before the Royal Bond. So I think with a true run race, he might have fared better, and he's likely to get that on Friday at Naas. So I would take a chance on opposing the top 2 with On Tober.
Okay, interesting. Lots of names thrown into the mix then there, and a selection from Barry. for that rescheduled race on Friday. And then, of course, Barry, we also have action at Kempton and Wetherby and Warwick all on Saturday over here in the UK. The Lanzarote hurdle card at Kempton is always a competitive handicap hurdle, but we've also got the Silvianarco Conti Chase, and we potentially will see Edwardstone here. He's entered anyway. That looks to be a decent enough renewal of that, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And obviously they're getting tired of chasing John Bon around with Edwardstone. I was actually hoping this fellow would go for a King George. I really fancied him stepping up on trip. Now, he did win the Desert Orchid a couple of seasons ago, so he has the pace for Kempton. Kempton can be a bit sharp for some horses, and it suits Pic D'Or. Now, it's a better version of the race this year than the last one. So I think Pic D'Or, albeit he has done really well, I think it's going to take a bigger performance this time. But Edwardstone, for me, as I say, I think he's crying out for a step up and trip, 2.5 mile, and I could see him maybe shake up the Ryanair market a bit too. Banbridge is there, who would have a chance, but I'd fear for him that 2.5 mile around Kempton could be on the sharp side. So I'd be slightly against Banbridge, and I'd be happy to take on Pic D'Or with Edwardstone.
Okay, and then elsewhere, the likes of Apple Away has an entry up in the Towton Novices Chase at Wetherby. Would look forward to seeing her, the Grade 1 winner, if she was to line up, along with a whole host of fairly decent horses in that contest. But is anything else catching your eye at any of the other venues or in the Lanzarote Hurdle itself back at Kempton?
Yeah, well, Apples Away is more likely to go to Warwick, I believe, for the 3 mile novice there, where Broadbet Boy is an entry, so that would be an interesting clash. The Lanzarote, I thought Neiman Lord, who finished fifth, in Cheltenham in the Great Wood, flattened the last 2 hurdles, still kept going, was only half a length behind Song Gino, which was a good run, but I think it'd be better stepping up and trip. But needs to just tidy up that jumping a little bit. But it looks a competitive race, but that was the one I was fancying there.
Okay, few to go to war with then for the weekend, and it should be, we should see some nice performances, I'm hopeful. Anyway, last but not least, boys, it's tracker time, please. So Tony, to wrap up this week's show, who is your horse? I mean, you've already given us 5, to be fair to you, from Limerick over Christmas, but throw a 6th in the mix for tracker time, please.
Well, it's actually not a new one. It's the same horse I've put up before. The Dawn, Liam Burke ran a Cork on Saturday. Look, slim pickings enough there, but I thought this horse probably ran specialist yet over hurdles. Now, look, absolutely buried out the back. Just impossible to win Irish maiden hurdles doing that. But I think they got him to finish off his race. I think it's the best way he's finished off a race so far in all his, 4 starts at this point. Made up an awful lot of ground, kind of from the 4th last time. He's either going to get a lowly mark, or they may even want to try him in one of the very ordinary country maiden hurdles that maybe one of the big yards hasn't got a horse in. But I do think the race to be won with the Dawn, but it is probably going to be handicaps, because I think plenty of cover will suit him.
A horse called Skylord. He ran in Leopardstown in the bumper on the 26th. Peter Fahey trains him, and he ran behind Gold in the Mountains. Very disappointing, but ran very, very keen through the race. He was still pulling as he was coming towards the 3 furlong marker. So I think this fellow settling next time, he's likely to put up a smart performance. His work is very good at home, so he's a horse I like a lot.
Okay, positive word for Skylord then. Thank you very much, boys. Barry and Tony, as always. Listeners and viewers out there, thank you very much. And don't forget the free bet competition. Comments below on your best anti-post bet at this point for the Cheltenham Festival, and you could be in with a chance of winning a £20 or €1 free bet with Ball Sports. But of course, T's and C's do apply. And in regards to the price boost, don't forget those. You've got Love Envoi, the Mares Hurdle, Corbetts Cross and the Turners, and Fil D'Or in the Ryanair, all boosted for you for a limited time only with Ball Sports. So they've been very generous this week. Thank you very much to the team there. Thank you very much for watching. That was Off the Fence. Join us again next week when we'll be back with more, of course. But for now, have a good week, and thank you very much for tuning in.